you're not powerless. You can, it's 100% on you. If you can change your situation, it always seems hard. It always seems impossible. But if you can go through all the stuff you went through in your life, clearly you're a lot stronger than you think, because a lot of other people in those situations don't make it to where you are, don't make it to that day of where they think they might be able to change something, or taking the first step to change something. Some people don't make it there.
Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. I'm Tara Woodlee, president of Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence. We're an organization that tries to help survivors improve their lives and thrive after they've come out of the crisis of domestic violence. Today we have Charity Gonzalez-Rosario. And she's one of our volunteers here at Break the Silence. She mans our support line, and our support line is like a really great resource. It's not a crisis line, but for survivors to call in, and if they need resources or just a listening ear, kind of what's going on, somebody's there to talk with you. So, Charity, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
It was wonderful to have you. So, Charity, I would love for you to start with just a little bit of your background. Tell us a little bit about your story as a survivor.
Honestly, well, the start of my abuse was as early as I could remember. I really didn't get out of it until I was 25, when I kind of was forced, the world kind of forced me to be on my own and everything. But yeah, so for about 25 years, I was in abuse. It started with like family members, like my aunt, coming to realize later my grandmother, like through proxy, my own mother and everything. And then after that, just rolling over into friendships and boyfriends and stuff like that.
Right. So, like for myself, there wasn't a whole lot of physical abuse, even though there was a little bit as childhood, but mostly it was emotional abuse and mental kind of things that set me up for my bad relationship that I entered into abuse. So is that similar for you as well?
Yeah, it was a lot of, for the only difference is for me, it was a lot of physical in my childhood as well. And some early on sexual abuse as well. Like my aunt was paranoid schizophrenic. And the thing about them is there's schizophrenic and then there's paranoid schizophrenic. And the paranoid one is the dangerous one. And they target people. They pick someone, and that's the center of their delusions. That's the person that's doing them wrong. That's the person who fronts all of their whatever. And unfortunately for me as a child, that was me for my aunt growing up. I think it stemmed from like a hatred of my father, whatever that had to do with the situation. I guess as someone with a mental illness, she couldn't differentiate the two, even though that's not an excuse. But it started with her being very aggressive, telling me things like she knew what I was doing. Like as like we would walk past each other in the hallway, and she'd be like, "Oh, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing," and then she'd call me a demon or something. And then there would be physical assaults where if I crossed her the wrong day that day, I would get beaten down to the ground. And then if it wasn't my aunt, it was my grandmother. Growing up, you get older and you think you're going to see where you went wrong as a child, see where, oh, yeah, that's what was wrong. That's what was this. That's where I could have done better. Oh, my parents were right in this. For me, it had the opposite effect. I grew up and I just realized how much I didn't deserve everything that I got, how wrong the other person was, And so growing up, I realized my grandmother was doing a lot of lying behind the scene. My grandmother was narcissistic as well.
Right.
And so, but she was like extremely covert. And back then, you didn't know what narcissism was. This is like, I was born in 95. And then, like, even before that, she already had her hands in the pots and people spun around her fingers to do things. And so she would do things like tell my mom that I did certain things I never did. I don't exactly, I think there was like one time I lit a candle when I wasn't supposed to. And my grandmother, with her bare fist, beat the crap out of me, like physically beat me down to the ground, like, and then after holding me up against the wall by my neck.
Wow.
I would get punished, and then my mom would come home and I'd stay punished. So to me, my mom knows what's going on. She's not doing anything about it. Come to find out, my mom never even knew I did that. My grandmother and my aunt came up with some lie saying I did something tremendously wrong and that, oh, but don't bother her, we'll handle it. And my mother was a single mom of 5 kids. She was a product of abuse basically as well. And she dealt with this narcissistic woman in her entire life. So she's extremely vulnerable and weak to her. And she's also relying on her to watch her kids while she works triple shifts at a nursing home because she's a CNA. She has a mortgage to pay and everything. She's not getting food stamps. She's not getting benefits. She technically doesn't qualify for some reason. She has to pay everything out of pocket. So she's not too concerned. She's like, okay, you dealt with it. I'm gonna not deal with it. And then if my mother would try to deal with it, or if my mother would try to not have to punish us, because my grandmother would do things like, my mother would come home and she'd be like, oh, these kids were so terrible, you have to do this, you have to go beat them, you have to do this. And if my mother tried to not do it, I have vivid memories of my grandmother doing things like putting her bed outside in the patio to sleep in the wintertime and putting all her stuff outside and saying, this is your mother's doing. Your mother's forcing me to sleep out here and all this other stuff. And then she would just cause hell for my mother if my mother just didn't do it. If my mother wouldn't just beat us, basically. So my mother was either put in her own realm of hell or forced to put us through hell. So it's just that cycle of every single day, my aunt doing it, my grandmother doing it, my grandmother making my mom do it by proxy. And for some reason, it was just me that bared the brunt of it. There's a lot of things where, like, I tell my mom, I was like, this is what like, I had a guitar and my brother came in one day and smashed my guitar. My mom was at home, and when my mom came home, my grandmother told my mom I had a tantrum and I smashed it. 2 weeks ago, my mother just found out that wasn't true and that my brother had smashed it. And I was like, so for almost the better part of 2 decades, you thought I did that? And she was like, no. And my mother was really upset because she spent money on this. And like, guitars are not cheap.
Oh, no.
So for her, it was this thing of like, oh, she was extremely upset, but she couldn't do anything because my grandmother told her not to. She dealt with it and everything. So for 2 decades, my mom thought I did this, and I didn't. And those are the kind of things like my grandmother would do just to manipulate my mother and make me seem like an evil child that deserved all this terrible punishment, that deserved to be beat every day, that deserved to watch the other kids get treated like the golden children and I get treated like crap. Little does my mom didn't know that all this time I was getting beat when she was at work.
Yeah.
And then, but my mom also used to do this thing where she would hit us and she would be like, I do this because I love you. If I didn't love you, I wouldn't do this. And so growing up, you think, okay, I'm getting beat like this because they must love me. So anyone who doesn't hit me doesn't love me. And we could see right there how that preludes right into a very toxic relationship with men in the future.
Right. Well, that was going to be my next question. So how did that affect you as you grew older and into relationships?
Because I was easily susceptible to be told I deserved to be treated that way. But see, the thing that my mom failed to realize is I understand you. As an adult, I understand you didn't know what was going on. I understand you were dealing with your own abuse and you were being lied to and everything. But as a kid, all this is happening. You're there. You're not doing anything about it. Therefore, this must be okay. Therefore, you must condone this. Therefore, I deserve this. And so that translates very heavily later in life to a boyfriend easily being able to be like, you deserve this, because if my own mother said I deserve stuff, like my own mother stabbed me twice when I was a kid.
Oh my gosh, no.
So to me, it's like, if my own mother is capable of doing that but claims she loves me, then everything is fair game as long as they love me.
So you said that later on your mindset, you were able to change that and realize you didn't deserve that. Was there something that happened, a pinnacle part that made you come to that realization at any time?
Getting sober.
Yeah, that will do it, won't it? Mm-hmm.
Getting sober. And I think me just being tired of being taken advantage of, me just being tired of being treated that way came first. And I don't think the acceptance of I didn't deserve that came until more recently. Like the full acceptance of, okay, I didn't deserve any of that. Really didn't come in until, like I said, more recently. And being in the relationship I am now, having him love me correctly really helped heal those last few bits of like, I didn't deserve that, and that's not what that was supposed to be.
Right.
But it was a lot of mostly just being tired and wanting to take control of my own situation is really what came first. Where it's like, it just felt like so many other people were controlling my life, in the sense of like how I felt like with the abuse and everything, just me allowing other people to control everything. You kind of have to want to take your control back before you realize you didn't even deserve it.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's essential for all of us victims, that we hit that pinnacle point of that we have to take back that control. The thing that made us spiral. I can very much relate to your story because we have a lot of similarities, because I'm the oldest of 5 children. Some of the things my mother did, I would not say my mother's an abuser, but there was times she was abusive.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Verbally, though, very much so. I blame myself for years because, the things you hear. You're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, you're not like the other children. And I wasn't like the other children because I had a different dad. And so I didn't make that connection and didn't know that till I was 11. And then it was like, oh, my head was for a long time. It was, oh, because of my dad, this is happening to me compared to everybody else. And
Yeah, exactly the same thing. They didn't like who my grandmother and my aunt hated they thought he was the spawn of Satan, like he was the devil himself. So therefore I must be the daughter of the devil.
right, right. How does that affect you, like, personality wise? Like, I know all of us, your parent is a part of you. So to think that they thought so little of your father in that way, was that warranted in any way as far as with your dad, that they transposed it on you? Or
No, not at all. I don't think it was really any of their business, to be honest. My father treated all of my mom's other kids really well. My father is, I will say, he's really great with other people's kids. Amazing with someone else's kids. Absolutely. And if he has to put on a show, like he's great with his own kid if he has to be. Um, but he's a good husband. I can't say he's not. He's he's a great person for the wrong people. Like he should have tried harder with his own kids as much as he tried with his stepkids. Regardless of what my father did, regardless of anything, I'm innocent of that.
right.
I'm always going to be the innocent party. But my father wasn't a terrible person. Also, my father was a man whore. He was a player. That was the extent of his terribleness. But he had a great sense of humor. He would go to work every day, no problem. Great provider, cook, clean, did laundry, took care of, had no problem changing diapers, had no problem taking care of kids. Like he was a great, like, family man. And so to think that he was this terrible, 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 evil, evil person, I've met 10 times more evil people than my own dad. My father's not a terrible person. He just makes shitty choices like the rest of us. So all of that hate was completely unwarranted. It's not like he did anything completely wrong or, you know, messed anything up or anything. It was their own delusion.
Right.
100% their own delusion. And that's the scary thing about abusers. It's not never based in logic. It's never based in fact. It's always based straight on their own mental illness, insecurities, and delusions.
Absolutely.
I 100% believe they just put everything negative that they thought about themselves and just decided that was that person. But because, you know, mental illness, unfortunately, doesn't let you acknowledge it like that, they find a scapegoat. And while I can understand and sympathize with this, it's really hard as someone who was abused by someone with such a severe mental illness. It's hard to differentiate the two because you want to be justifiably mad. You want to be angry and everything. But like now, like I saw my aunt a month ago. There's nothing for me to be mad at her about.
Right.
It's almost like the quality of life for the people who did the most damage to me is so low. I can't bring myself to still hold a grudge against these people.
Would you say that you've forgiven them in a way? And if you have, what brought you to that point?
Honestly, like just seeing, like I said, I think it was just seeing, like my grandmother has dementia and she's bedridden. It's hard to be mad. It's like beating a dead horse. I can't, there's nothing to be mad at anymore. It's done. It's in the past. I can't change it. And I think what it is that for years I searched for closure. People search for closure.
Oh, yeah.
You don't get closure. Closure doesn't exist. And I think once you understand that, it's very easy to just be like, well, then there's nothing to be mad at all these years later. Closure doesn't exist. I'm never going to get the apology I want. I'm never going to get people to acknowledge the things they did. You know, my mom did, and that is the only person I truly actually cared about. You know, my mom will sit there and she has begged for my forgiveness and everything, and we can have conversations and everything. And my mom has my kids right now. Like that's how
Right.
much I trust her. Like me and my mom are great, but that's because I did get that bit of closure from her. But I've accepted the fact that she's the only person I'm going to get it from. But once you kind of understand you're never going to get those apologies or those answers, those explanations you want, it's a little easier to kind of just let it go. Especially when you do see them in other predicaments, like they have dementia, and like I'm definitely never getting it out of them now. So
No, absolutely.
now, the boyfriends, on the other hand, are a different story.
Well, let's go into the boyfriends. So, when did your relationship start? At what age?
So, when I was 15, I lived in Puerto Rico with my mother. And my mother went out one day and something happened, and me and my grandmother got into an altercation over something that, again, she lied, manipulated, it never happened, her own delusion. And it was the final time she'd put her hands on me, and I literally said, I don't care what you do to me anymore, I'm not lying. And I think that was when she kind of realized I was getting too old maybe to be manipulated.
Right.
So she manipulated my mother to send me to New York to live with my father. And she told my mother that I was a liability. She made up a lie saying that I beat my grandmother and everything. So my mom sent me away, kicked me out at 15, told me I was a liability. And then I moved in with my dad. And when I was living with my dad, less than a year into it, me and my dad did not have a good relationship. Like I said, great with other people's kids, not his own. Um, he has no backbone when it comes to women. And my stepmom is narcissistic, again, very abusive, very toxic household. Like her and her daughters just put hands on each other all the time. Within the first year of living with them, I met a guy in high school. He was a senior. His name was Jeremy. And because I was having such a tumultuous time at home, it was very easy for him to kind of swoop in and be my distraction, my, knight in shining armor, whatever. Um, my parents didn't like the fact that I was seeing him or something like that. Something happened. They wanted us to break up. I tried breaking up with him. And then that's when he started with the they don't care about you. I'm the only one who cares about you. Because he saw what was going on and he used it. And
Right.
then sure enough, me and my stepmother got into it, and then me and my stepsister got into it. We actually got into a physical altercation and I got kicked out of the house. And guess who I go stay with?
Of course. Yeah, naturally.
And it never went back. I stayed with him. We lived at his friend's house, and it didn't take too long. It was like maybe 6 months into the relationship when he first put his hands on me. And the first time he put his hands on me, he actually almost killed me. He choked me for something I never even did. He thought I did something that I didn't do, and we got into an argument. I remember not backing down. I remember just being like, "You're not gonna be an asshole to me." And then I don't exactly remember what happened next. I just remember being on the ground and he was choking me and I was losing consciousness. And then eventually he let up, and I remember just like sitting on the chair, and then he did the thing. Looking back, I was like, "Fuck, he had a playbook." I'm so sorry. I will never do that again. I don't know what came over me. I love like just the script, the perfect script. And shortly after that, I got pregnant, and then it just roller coastered from there.
Right.
And we were together for about 5 years, and the abuse was so it took 10 years for people to finally realize he was abusive. 10 years after we broke up. Just recently, people are discovering how abusive he is. And I'm now realizing that it was because when I told stories of what he was doing, it was so bad. People were like, "There's no way that's what he's doing."
Oh, yes.
He used to take my neck and throw me around like a rag doll. Just spend the day with just tossing me around by my neck. I have a bite mark on my back where he just took a chunk out of me. He was a third-degree black belt, and at that point, you're technically supposed to register your hands as legal weapons or something like that. And he would roundhouse kick me in the back of my skull. He broke my finger over a video game. He attempted to kill me 2 other times. Of course, naturally, then came like the sexual abuse. I think the first time he did it, I was pregnant, and I was like, how do you do that with someone who's pregnant in crime?
Well, and with your child.
And the most sick part is he won't deny any of it. He will sit there and be like, "Yeah, so." Like he doesn't see what's wrong with it.
It's no wonder people look at us really weird when we tell them these kinds of situations, 'cause I have some similar situations as well. People just they can't fathom it, because this is what I tell people, they can't fathom it because when you experience this moments, it's genuine evil, and people can't put their head into a concept that people can be that evil. They can't see it or feel it, they don't wanna accept it. But when you see that kinda evil look you straight in the eye, you know what it is from that moment on.
But I think what made it worse with that was, again, like I'm coming from my own familial history of toxic environment and abuse. I went to my dad's house, who's toxic environment and abuse. And I think what made this prolong so long without me seeing it was that his family was involved in it as well. The abuse wasn't just his family. It wasn't just him. It was his family. His family enabled him. Like he was the ringleader. My mom recently sent me a TikTok or something where it talked about narcissistic family cults,
Yes.
where the one narcissist in the family is like the cult leader, and everyone in the family just does everything to please him and enables him and make excuses for him and make it easier for him to keep his behavior. That's exactly what it was. 100%. It was 100%. That's what I was living. I was living in a narcissistic family cult. And unfortunately, because of all of my history with toxic familial settings, to me, this is somewhat normal.
Well, it's love.
It's love.
That's what you got told, right?
You guys must love each other so much.
Yes, absolutely.
There must be so much love here. I'm choking on it. Oh no, that's just, your hands. But
And
yeah.
people don't realize, like, for anyone who's experiencing that out there, who's watching, like, if you're in a situation where you're being strangled, you're 69% more likely to be killed in a domestic violence. Oh yeah, it's very dangerous for anyone. Yeah, because it's so intimate.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing, is more intimate than the type of abuse. That's what they talk about, is that that person has to intimately look that other person in the eye, and they know they're snuffing out their life. So it's very an intimate type of violence, in a way of they make it very personal.
It's weird because I used to remember the look on his face when it happened, like every time when he would do it. I used to be able to remember the look. Like it used to haunt. And I think it's like my brain's protecting me or something. It doesn't allow me to remember the look. But I used to say he looked so evil. Like there was just nothing but evil there. He looked like in his brain he was saying die. I stayed in that for like 5 years, and then at the end of it, I did attempt to unalive myself.
Mm-hmm.
Once you go through all that, you're like, well, clearly I'm worthless. Um, Clearly, there's something wrong with me. And I did, and I ended up in the hospital for a week, and then I got out of the hospital. When I got out of the hospital, I told him, I said, you're either going to stay and fix your family or you're going to leave. And he decided to beat the crap out of me one last time. It was one of the worst ones he had ever done. And he almost killed me again. He almost strangled me in front of my daughters. And then I called the cops. The cops showed up. Cops saw that there were kids involved. Cops called CPS. CPS showed up and said, oh, and mind you, my kids are saying, daddy hurts mommy. Daddy's hurt, like daddy hurts mommy. And they were like, oh, well, you just spent a week in a hospital after trying to kill yourself. He gets the kids. And then they gave him my kids. And then I had to fight for 8 years. I just got custody. Like, I never lost full custody. We always had 50-50, but he had primary and they lived with him. And I had to have parenting time. And I had, like, no say in anything that happened with them. Last month, I finally got full custody back, like 100% full legal custody, because I proved he was extremely abusive. Because, you don't just stop being that abusive once the woman leaves. You now have 3 little mini versions of her. And then it's not, like I said, it's not just him. He took them into the house of this narcissistic cult family. It took me like 8 years to prove that he was extremely abusive. And I did get full custody, legal full custody finally, but that happening at the time just cements how you deserve this. You're so worthless, you don't even deserve your children.
Right.
And so what was the next thing I got into? Another abusive relationship. Only this one was a drunk abusive. And I was with that one for 2 years, and he was really good at making it seem like I deserved it as well. They're really good. They're so good at making it seem like you deserve it.
Well, yeah, because they have to gaslight you into you're the problem, not them. That's the standard MO.
It causes so much turmoil inside your brain, though, when you're going through it, because it's almost impossible to get out of. Kind of looking back on it and realizing it, when you're stuck in that cycle, like, the only one who can break it is you, and if you're not strong enough to break it, you're stuck.
Right. And the system's not geared to help you whatsoever.
That's why with the whole thing with my kids, it just cemented that I'm stuck in this, because now the system is taking its turn. I'm telling the system, hey, I'm actually being abused. I was actually abused. And they're like, so? Like, oh, okay, clearly it's not a big deal. Clearly this is okay.
it's sad. It's very sad that the system doesn't really listen to victims.
The other issue with growing up in such a, and for anyone in such a toxic environment, is you're just learning how to get through the day. You're just learning how to survive. You're not learning how to be an adult. You're not learning how to take care of yourself. You're not learning how to do anything. So it makes, once you're even are remotely out of an abusive situation, that much harder to even progress, because now you have to go and basically retrain yourself how to do anything, how to be an adult, how to regulate your emotions, how to eat properly, how to pay your rent properly, how to hold down a job, how to handle friendships and everything. And that's another thing that they definitely don't tell you, is it leads you into choosing toxic and abusive friendships. And
Right.
those can be just as damaging, if not more. It's very, very easy to just get stuck in this cycle once that's all you've known.
So you've got full custody of your kids now. What kind of challenges are you having with the children coming back from that cult-like atmosphere?
Not only the fact that they were abused, but they picked up abusive tendencies. My daughter is an she likes to hold you hostage emotionally. It's not so bad now that she's been out of it for like a couple, almost 2 months they've been out now. But she was really big on, I need you to help me calm down. You have to sit here. You have to listen to me. You have to, like, she's breaking down as she's telling me, like, you have to, you have to. And the issue with dealing with the fact that they were around their father so much is that they do have, like I said, those abusive tendencies now. And it's hard for me because I'm still healing and I'm still,
Mhm.
it's almost like I'm put right back into the abuse. But my brain has to be like, this isn't that. These are children. They don't know any better. So I guess that separation that my grandmother and my aunt should have done, I'm learning to do. Um, I would say that's the biggest challenge, is my own triggers and my own children having picked up those things and triggering me myself, where it's like, okay, I need a moment, I need to walk away, I need to breathe, because we're trying to gentle parent over here. And like there was one time when I told my daughter was freaking out, and I put myself in the bedroom, and she was like a toxic boyfriend, just banging and banging and banging on the door. You have to love me. You have to love me. Just banging on the door, trying to push it open and everything. And it's like, I need a minute and I don't know how to deal with this because we're both triggered now. So I would say that's the biggest issue. It's just hard when clearly we're both triggered. It would be a lot easier to deal with if there was no abuse, but because there's so many layers of abuse between my children and me, you know,
Yeah, because you're essentially having to do that healing journey together.
together, and that's not good.
In a way, it can be good, and sometimes it is not going to be good.
It's not when my part of mine when my part of my healing is I need space and control, and their part of healing is they need proper love and affection, and
Mhm.
that's kind of why they're with my mom right now. They're on summer vacation, but she's kind of helping to kind of stable them out and give me a chance to have my breather and everything. Because
Yeah, yeah, that's important. How old is your daughter? That's the one who's doing that at the door.
she's 10. I had twins, so yeah, it's mostly the twins. My oldest, she's very reserved. She's 11. Um, she's a little more reserved and quiet. The issue with her though is that over at her father's house, she dealt with a lot of body shaming because she's bigger, and she her father's white, and I'm obviously 100% Puerto Rican. Um, she looks more like me. she looks more ethnic. She has kinkier hair. She has a bigger build. She has darker skin tone than her sisters and her father and everything. And she dealt with a lot of body shaming. She got told she was fat a lot, that she wasn't pretty, that she'll never get a boyfriend, that she stinks, like just a bunch of stuff that's just so mean and damages a girl's self-esteem. So for her, she's very quiet and reserved. She's very withdrawn. We're trying to get her more explain to her. It's like no, you're just ethnic. You're just Spanish, hon. You have that skin tone because you're Spanish. You have a bigger, body than most girls because you're Spanish. You have kinkier hair because you're Spanish, not because you're ugly, not because you're so different, not because there's something wrong with you or anything like that. You're just, you took a little more after your mother than your sisters did. That is all, because her sisters are like tinier and suppose prettier. I put prettier in air quotes, because they're all pretty.
Well, and society doesn't help this whole scenario.
That it's the way society, makes her feel, and her father heavily pressed society's views on her. Um, so she deals with a lot of that, and then the twins just deal with a lot of like emotional damage. Like my one twin, she's a people pleaser. She figured out early that if I just do everything and I make people happy, we won't get in trouble. We won't get beat. We won't get yelled at. So she just does everything. Which is terrible, because that's a form of grooming in my eyes. That you
Right.
made that she feels the need that because she's the girl, she has to do the dishes and cook for the men in the house and do this and everything. It's like, no, she's a child. She shouldn't have to be doing that. And then the other one is just complete meltdown, emotional hostage. It's a lot.
Well, yeah, because you have so many different aspects that you're having to work with. One that you're helping come out of their shell. The other one, you've got to try to figure out how you make them have a voice where they can say no.
Mm-hmm.
And not please everybody all the time, right? And then this one, your last one, this one needs sucks. It sounds like all the air out of the room, so that yeah, and to give them all the attention they need can be very challenging.
But the thing with that is, my boyfriend had asked me one time, because we heard a song, I think it was him that had asked me, like, do you think like generational trauma is a thing? And I
Oh
was
yeah,
like, and with seeing how now my kids are being affected from a scenario that started way back with my grandmother.
right. And who knows where her trauma came from? So yeah, my family has that.
It's just just generation after generation of it's just a cycle. So to say, does abuse in your childhood or in your family affect your relationships in the future? Yes, 100%. It basically is the building blocks for how your relationships go in the future, unfortunately.
Well, and unfortunately too, when you start to get into relationships, they use those things against you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they do. They know. I know I experienced that. Oh, well, it's this way because of your childhood trauma, because of your abandonment, because of so they use these things that you're telling somebody that you're intimate with, all these little details about yourself, and they turn around and they use them as a weapon against you. And it makes it hard to connect with the next person
It makes
because
you not want to.
yeah, absolutely. Because you opened yourself up as to who you were, and your background and everything was just like a dart being thrown at you every time you turned around, and it makes it really hard. But yeah, it's doable. I know I have a great relationship now, so it's doable. And you're exploring a new relationship. Sounds like it's pretty good, right?
Yeah. Um, but what I'm hoping is I've caught before it got too badly where it's going to roll down into my daughter's lives too much. They're still young enough where now I have them and I can show them this wasn't right. This is how it's actually supposed to be. And I'm hoping with that and with my children, I finally managed to break that generational trauma where their children won't have to know what abuse is because they'll be raised in a better home.
Yeah, the key to that is just really good conversations with them. I know I feel like I tell people all the time when I speak across the country because, I lost a daughter 12 years ago to domestic violence. And I feel like part of the problem was, they lived through it with me into teen years. So I didn't think we had to converse about it once I got out of it and they got out of it and we were living our best lives. And I just thought, okay, we're healed. We don't have to talk about these things. And then when she started picking relationships, she picked, like, she was trying to get the acceptance from him that she didn't get from her father. And so I regretted not really sitting down and having those conversations with her and keeping that open. I think that was part of my mistake over the years. Not that she would have entirely listened to me through her teen years about any of that. But I do believe that is just like really important to just keep that dialogue open and not assume just because they saw it, they know better.
I never wanted to treat my children like they were such adults at such a young age, but circumstances have made me had to. But I've already like I'll sit here and we'll watch YouTube videos on what on an incel is, you know, on what I put on like a whole explanation on what a narcissist actually is, and they sat here and they were like, "Oh my God, that's daddy," and I was like, "Look at you guys putting two and two together."
There you go. Yes. But you're educating them.
And I tell them, I was like, "You guys know how if you guys ever meet anyone who ever makes you feel a little bit like your father ever made you feel, or a little bit like anything, just no instant red flag. Like I have such a fear of someone ever hurting them ever again that I want them to be so equipped that I don't have to do anything. They just know. And I want them to be so tired of what they went through that they never want to go through it again, which is kind of what had to happen to me. I had to be so tired of what I went through that I chose I will be with a nobody. I will have nobody in my life and just be by myself if it means not ever being abused or taken advantage of ever again. And I want them to grow up with that resolve already. I don't want someone else to hurt them so badly again that they're forced into that resolve. I want them to have that resolve already. And so I keep a very open dialogue with them already.
That's wonderful. Well, is there anything else that you would like for our audience to know, Charity, as far as like with your experience with childhood abuse and trauma? And what would you say to somebody else who's going through similar experience like yours?
You're not powerless. It's 100% on you. If you can change your situation, it always seems hard. It always seems impossible. But if you can go through all the stuff you went through in your life, which if you're in an abusive relationship, clearly, you've gone through some stuff in your life. If you can go through the bad, if you can get through being abused, if you can survive up until that day today that you're surviving, clearly you're a lot stronger than you think, because a lot of other people in those situations don't make it to where you are, don't make it to that day of where they think they might be able to change something or taking the first step to change something. Some people don't make it there. So if you've made it to that point where you're thinking about changing something, or you're thinking about changing your situation or reaching out for help, you can absolutely do it, because clearly you got that far. And personally, so the way I like to say, I'll be damned if I made it. I didn't get this far to get this far. I didn't go through everything I went through to stop here.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Charity, I thank you so much. And I'd love to have you back on again.
I would love to be back.
Awesome. That would be incredible. So thank you, Charity, so much. And this concludes this episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. Please like, subscribe, and share. Check out our website, www.breakthesilence.org, and we have a store. You can get some great merchandise there, help support the podcast, and proceeds go to help our programs that help survivors thrive. So thank you, and we'll see you next time.